Chapter 14. Hitting the Fan.
Coming to you from the Peacekeeper carrier Pax Magellanic, I'm Monel Farash with GNO. The Peacekeepers have welcomed us, and you, aboard one of their most impressive carriers on the front lines of this conflict on the frontier. Just the other day, the Harith rebels bombed a trade depot which, at the time of the attack, had 2 Quillant Trade Federation freighters docked within it. Both were destroyed and their crews killed. The Harith Navy was able to track down one of the rebel vessels and destroy it, but the other 2 were able to escape. Understandably, the Quillant are demanding restitution and revenge, and their fleet is reported to be en route to the Harith system. Stay tuned for updates as events unfold. Back to you, Zarsix and Megan. Would you look at that? That's a lot of firepower,
Benny says as the primary display resolves into 4 Peacekeeper carriers holding position in space, surrounded by a dozen or so smaller Peacekeeper vessels. 20 or 30 Zangar ships, considerably smaller than the Peacekeeper vessels, flit around the 4 large warships. Opposite them, still within the boundaries of the Harith system, is a small fleet of Harith Defense Force ships. Only one is the size of a Peacekeeper ship, with the rest much smaller.
Should we go around?
Maxim asks. Zephyr looks up from her station.
Even at FTL, it'd take too long. With the Quillant on their way, the Harith will have no choice but to acquiesce and allow the Peacekeepers into the system to help squash the rebellion. If they don't, they face being forcibly invaded and drawn into a war they can't hope to win. If they give in, the GC has a strong foothold and a reason to push for them to join. And if they resist, the GC will have a strong foothold and the firepower to force them to join. Sucks to be the rebels right now. No matter what happens, they're likely about to be wiped out by the very people who've been supplying them.
Benny looks up from his station.
Moot point.
No sooner has the last word left his mouth than a few dozen warships drop out of FTL, directly between the Peacekeeper forces and the allies to the Harith Navy, and immediately open fire in every direction at every ship, Peacekeeper and Harith Navy alike. Ships start exploding on both sides, taken completely by surprise.
The rebels, damn it!
Wil exclaims, grabbing the controls, bringing the Ghost around in a wide arc, off its original course.
Computer, combat alert!
A torpedo whizzes by the ship, exploding just aft, rocking the ship heavily. Chaos erupts on both sides as ships accelerate toward the battle, weapons blazing. 2 of the Peacekeeper carriers begin launching fighters, while the smaller Zangar ships spread out, forming wolf packs and chasing the rebel ships. Wil knows that the Zangar do not have a massive navy, since the GC technically protects them with Peacekeepers, but all GC members are allowed to keep a small home fleet. The Zangar, apparently wanting blood after the trade station explosion, seem to have sent their entire home fleet here.
You got it. Combat alert.
The chipper computer replies.
All tactical systems online. Shields at full power.
Zephyr is furiously working her console, tagging as many ships as she can.
Looks like the rebels don't realize who's been supplying them, or just don't care. They're attacking everyone. Peacekeeper, Zangar, and Harith.
Wil is swinging the ship below a flaming Peacekeeper ship, a corvette from the looks of the remains.
Karma is a bitch,
he yells. The ship takes a hit and sparks erupt from overhead.
Max, weapons free, focus on the rebels.
But Peacekeepers and Harith are free game too, until we can get clear and find someone to give our information to. Someone shoots at us, shoot right back at them. Outside the Ghost, a flaming Peacekeeper carrier explodes as it takes 24 missiles to its port side. 6 Harith rebel ships break formation around the burning carrier. Another wave of ships follows close behind, unleashing more missiles into the flaming side of the massive ship. Escape pods are ejecting from all over the carrier, even while its guns are still firing. Some of the crew clearly deciding to go down with the ship, or being told to. 3 of the rebel ships explode at that moment. Another takes a hit and careens past the dying carrier, right into a Harith Navy cruiser. Fighters are flitting around, taking whatever shots they can, letting their missiles fly in all directions. The Ghost tilts on its wings and flies between two of the larger Harith Navy ships, shields flaring, disruptors blasting out at the smaller craft in its path. A rebel frigate is directly ahead, and before he can think to give the order, Will hears the telltale rattle that precedes missiles launching from the lower section of the ship. Suddenly, 4 missiles break out from under the Ghost, flying straight for the rebel ship. It tries to outmaneuver the fast-moving projectiles, but fails, taking all 4 on its side. Seconds later, the entire ship cracks in half as secondary explosions riddle the vessel. The Ghost flies right through the gap in the 2 flaming halves. Will lets out a whoop. Great shooting! Zephyr calls out targets as Maxim continues to work the tactical console. This is fun, the big Pelorian is shouting, destroying smaller rebel craft with well-placed disruptor bolts. The turret mounted on the upper section of the bridge module is letting loose blasts in all directions. From the screen in the corner, the GNO feed is still narrating events to the whole galaxy.
If you're just joining us, things here outside the Harith system have taken a turn for the, well, worse is putting it mildly. Tempers are already reaching boiling point when a small vessel appears out of FTL, attempting to enter the Harith system. It's unclear if these 2 events are connected, but shortly after this vessel appeared, so did the Harith rebels. The rebels were only on the scene a fraction of a talk before opening fire on the peacekeepers. The Harith Navy and the Zangar, the entire area has erupted into chaos, with ships firing at each other, seemingly at random. The newscaster pauses, listening to her co-anchors back in the studio. Yes, Zarsix, it's been terrifying, but so far the Pax Magellanic has remained safely out of the fight. I'll keep you posted as things develop. For now, back to you and Megan.
Gabe. Having decided that standing on the bridge offers very little value, Gabe has spent much of his time in the engineering, figuring that this will be a better use of not just his time, but capabilities. The days spent in FTL en route to the Harith system have afforded Gabe time to get to know the crew, as well as the systems of the Ghost. He has to admit, the stories about the Ankaran shipwrights are true. The Ghost is an impressive vessel for its size. He had been busying himself cleaning a spare thermocouple when the ship lurches to one side, the computer announcing, "Combat alert, secure all sections, all personnel report to battle stations." Silently, Gabe sends a wireless connection request to the main computer.
Computer, report please.
Over the wireless connection, the ship replies,
The captain has activated the ship's combat systems. Several ships have begun firing, causing all ships in the vicinity to return fire. We are in crossfire.
Calmly, Gabe puts the thermocouple and his cleaning supplies away, activating the magnetic components of his feet to keep standing as the ship shakes and rattles from the impacts, lurching in and attempting to avoid enemy fire. A flashing alert draws his attention. One of the starboard plasma conduits has begun leaking, interfering with other systems nearby. Gabe picks up a portable toolkit, his smaller manipulators holding it against his torso, and enters the starboard service corridor. Similar corridors run from each side of the engineering space the entire length of the ship's wing, ending in a crawl space in the actual engine pod. The starboard corridor is already toxic to most oxygen-breathing species by the time Gabe enters it. Plasma from the ruptured conduit is flowing into the area, turning into a toxic gas as it interacts with the ship's breathable atmosphere. Gabe hurries up the corridor to where the breach is indicated, the ship still shaking all around him. Withdrawing a patch kit from his toolkit, he moves aside wiring and other equipment from around the rupture. Many wires have already corroded into the gas. As he places the patch over the breach, it magnetically seals itself against the conduit. With the touch of a button on the control pad built into the patch itself, the outer edges of the patch begin to melt, fusing to the conduit. When the indicator on the patch control panel turns green, Gabe returns his attention to the other components nearby, stripping away the corroded insulation and, in some cases, cutting wires and patching new pieces in. Gabe is returning to engineering when another alert lights up on the master ship's system display. He immediately hurries out through the main crew space. The airlock leading into the cargo area has snapped closed. There's an enormous breach in the hull. Air is whistling out of it. Cycling through the airlock, Gabe grabs a large piece of metal from its resting place against the bulkhead and lurches toward the breach. The ship's maneuvers aren't helping, despite being able to magnetize his feet. The grav plating is having a hard time compensating, and the patch in his hand shifts awkwardly. But he soon has the patch secured, the ship's computer confirming no more leaks. Gabe has made it back to the main crew space when the ship rattles worse than it ever has before, and the sound of wrenching metal fills his sensors. He runs to the engineering area and glances at the master display, rushing into the port service corridor.
Captain, he says into his comms unit, our port engine pod has taken several hits. FTL will be impossible if it takes any more abuse. Something catches his attention. Perhaps his report to the captain was optimistic. FTL may already be a non-option. Worse before it gets better. Each time the Ghost attempts to make a break deeper into the Harith system, a rebel, peacekeeper, or Harith Navy ship interrupts them. Captain, our port engine pod has taken several hits, Gabe reports from the engineering space. FTL will be impossible if it takes any more abuse.
Doing what I can, Gabe. You do the same.
Swinging the Ghost in a tight arc, Will barely avoids a Zangar cruiser that's flying out of control, flames and debris falling from it as it goes.
Hold on!
He spins the ship on its axis to avoid what looks like a piece of an FTL engine. The battle has been raging for close to an hour. One peacekeeper carrier is nothing but a wreck, another is limping to the outer edge of the engagement. The Zangar, out for blood, aren't letting the rebels have even a second's rest. The Quillant, who have also arrived, have mainly been engaging the Harith, only occasionally firing on the rebels if one gets close. Meanwhile, the Ghost, as an actual third party, is doing its best not to get destroyed by all sides, who seem to think the Ghost is whomever they're angry at. We've got to get clear. We're taking too many hits, Zephyr shouts from her station. The port disruptor is on the verge of overheating, and we're running out of missiles. Maxim looks over from his station.
We still have the XPX 1900s.
Will nods.
We might end up needing them if things keep up like this.
The ship shakes and rocks, and the primary display wavers and crackles with static before returning to normal. A panel to Will's left explodes, showering him in sparks. 2 Rebel light attack craft are swooping around on an attack run. Maxim takes one out using the starboard disruptor, but the other rains weapons fire across the back of the ship and the neck connecting the forward section. Captain, there's a hull breach in the cargo area. Gabe's voice filters through the alarms blaring on the bridge. Will steals a glance at the master system display off to the side of his console. The cargo hold is flashing red, while the crew lounge is slowly pulsing orange, on the verge of losing pressure too. The hatch between the two spaces must have been compromised.
Do what you can do, Gabe. Max, get those XPs ready.
The big Pelorian grins evilly.
XPXs. And acknowledged.
Benny, who's been quiet for some time now, pipes up. Will, I have an idea. Will glances over.
I'm all ears.
The ship corkscrews around a Harith Navy cruiser, which is slugging it out with a Quillant carrier. I've been scanning all the comms chatter since this whole mess started, and I think I've isolated the primary frequencies each faction is using. If we can boost the power of our transmitter, I might be able to broadcast our data to all of them at the same time.
Gabe, did you hear that?
I did, Captain. I will do what I can down here to provide the power that Benny requires. I need only a few more syntax to address the hull breach.
Will looks at Benny. Get to work.
This will likely piss off Zarix and Lorath, you know, Zephyr points out. Whatever it is they have planned for this info is about to be undone.
Can't be helped. If we survive this, we can work on making it up to them or avoiding them.
The Ghost spins around another Quillant ship, firing the last 2 regular missiles at a rebel ship that has just fired on a peacekeeper cruiser.
Max, that largest rebel ship, put 2 XPXs in it. With the other 2, target the peacekeeper carrier there.
He points at the 4th peacekeeper carrier on the main display, which has somehow avoided any substantial damage.
That one. They clearly know something. They're staying just out of the main engagement zone. Maxim nods, working his console. Deep inside the weapons magazine in the body of the ship, 4 of the 6 XPX 1900 missiles are moving into the forward launchers, 2 in each chamber, 2 in the ready loader of each chamber. There are still dozens of ships in the fight, slugging it out, firing whatever they have left at each other. The Zangar, by far the smallest force in this melee, are down to only a few ships, mostly hovering near the lone peacekeeper carrier that's entirely undamaged. Another peacekeeper carrier is limping away, while yet another burns, and a final one is nothing more than several large chunks of debris. 2 of the shipbuster missiles streak away from the Ghost toward the now doomed rebel ship. Moments later, 2 massive explosions rip the vessel apart. The remaining rebels, having probably caused as much confusion as they feel they can, have slowly withdrawn, fighting to extricate themselves in order to make a getaway. The Ghost is trailing smoke and drive plasma from its port FDL engine pod, and its port disruptor is offline. Benny hoots, "Got it! I'm ready!" "Gabe, you ready?"
"Yes, Captain."
Will looks over to Benny, just long enough to nod. "Do it."
Once again, I'm Monel Farash with GNO aboard the peacekeeper carrier Pax Magellanic, where, following the arrival of the Quillant, who have immediately engaged the Harith Navy and the rebels alike, a small Uncaran raptor called the Ghost has really changed the tenor of this battle. The anchor pauses. Hectic is putting it mildly, Megan. It's likely that thousands have already died, and more are dying as we speak. It's madness, and I don't know if the GC is on board with this, or what the results will be here, but I'll keep reporting to the end. "Transmitting now," Benny announces, hitting a button on his console. His words are largely drowned out by the sound of something exploding against the ship. The truth comes out. Zephyr is staring intently at her console. "That peacekeeper carrier is targeting us," she shouts. "They're accelerating."
Will nods. "Figured. They must be the ship that has our evildoers aboard." He spins the Ghost about and pushes the power controls to the max. The acceleration compensators struggle to do their job, as the Ghost flies through the remains of the battle, dodging debris and weapons fire. The peacekeeper carrier has turned and is burning after the much smaller ship. The Zangar and Quillant, having received the transmission, have moved off. The Harith are moving to intercept the Ghost, while the rebels are scattering in whatever direction contains the least ships.
"Peacekeeper carrier is closing the gap," Zephyr reports. "We're almost in the engagement envelope."
Will looks to Max. "Aft weapon status?" Max looks up from his console, his face not exuberant as it had been earlier. "Aft missile bay is offline, and our aft disruptor ray is non-functional. Shields are at 64%. I'm afraid our backside isn't well protected."
"They're closing, Will,"
Zephyr announces, looking from her console to Will. Will glances around at his crew. "Anything from, well, anyone? A response to our transmission?"
"The Harith are on an intercept course, but still a few fractions of a talk out. The peacekeepers will get to us first," Zephyr reports. "No one has replied to our transmission, though the peacekeepers are trying to jam all comms now."
The ship rocks and Will grabs the controls, banking the ship hard to port. More sparks and smoke erupt from a panel near Benny's station, eliciting a screech from the small Brelec. "Oh shit," Will yelps, slamming his controls to the side, spinning the stars on the display, and barely avoiding one of the Harith Navy cruisers. "Sorry, didn't see them there." He smooths out their flight as the Harith ship opens fire on the peacekeeper carrier.
"Oh, it's on," Benny shouts. "They're engaging the peacekeeper carrier."
Zephyr is studying her console.
"They don't stand a chance. That ship avoided the fighting. It's fresh. It'll destroy them."
Benny leaves his station to stand next to Will.
"Better them than us."
In response, Will punches him in the arm, which sends the smaller alien flying across the bridge.
"Ouch! That hurt."
Will looks at Maxim. "Let's even the odds." When Maxim raises an eyebrow questioningly,
He only nods.
You didn't fire the last of those shipbusters, right?
The big ex-peacekeeper doesn't break eye contact with Wil, but reaches down and taps a key on his console. Quietly, he says,
"One XPX 1900 away."
The sound of a single missile firing reverberates through the hull. On the screen, it streaks outward, before banking sharply and turning past the ship. Wil adjusts the primary display, switching to an aft-facing camera. The big peacekeeper ship is engaging with a half-dozen Harith ships. 2 are drifting, one still firing as it also drifts away from the engagement. No one seems to notice the XPX 1900 until it's too late. The missile strikes the big ship amidships, cracking it in half, and causing hundreds of secondary explosions to ripple through its surface. The Harith naval vessels break wide, avoiding the explosions. As they watch, lifeboats begin streaking out of the dying peacekeeper ship in all directions. Everyone on the bridge lets out a shout of triumph, quickly interrupted by Gabe.
Captain, the port wing stabilizer has taken extensive damage. Controls will be sluggish. I suggest you keep our speed at no more than 3/4 max. We are going to need a space dock to effect repairs.
Keep an eye on it, Gabe.
Wil adjusts their speed, sliding the main sublight thruster controls down a few notches, dropping their speed. He alters their course for the main Harith homeworld. Grimly, he asks,
"Gabe, will we make it to Harith Prime?"
If we can avoid further damage to our control systems, perhaps,
the bot replies.
It is possible I can go out on the hull and effect a temporary repair to the port stabilizer assembly. It will not be a permanent fix, I'm afraid. Incoming comms from the Harith Navy, the lead ship,
Zephyr announces.
On screen.
The primary display, still wobbling and static-laden at times, switches from the stars to a smoky command center filled with a harried and bloodied Harith.
Thank you, she says. I don't know who you are, or what you are even, but the people of Harith owe you a debt of gratitude. I am Commander Sheraton of the Harith Navy.
She bows deeply.
You're welcome. I'm Wil Calder, and this is my crew.
Before Wil can finish, the ghost shakes and lurches to the side, Zephyr shouting a warning. On the screen, filling with static, the Harith ship is lurching as well. 3 new peacekeeper carriers have dropped out of FTL, nearly on top of the remaining Harith Navy and the Ghost, unleashing every weapon they have on their prey. Smoke is filling the bridge. Maxim, Zareth, and Benny are all shouting. On the screen, Commander Shritan is shouting orders at her bridge crew. She turns back to the camera and Wil.
Get to Harith Prime,
she shouts. Then the screen fills with static and returns to the bank of the star field.
Zyrsix and Megan, things have gone from really bad to terrible here outside the Harith system. The Pax Magellanic is no more, having taken a direct hit of some type, which snapped the mighty ship in half. Moments after the ship exploded, the Ankaran Raptor, the Ghost, transmitted a data packet which, well, if true, is immensely damning to the Peacekeepers and the GC.
Smoke is everywhere in the background as the newscaster raises her voice.
I'm currently aboard an escape pod with my camera bot and a few of Pax Magellanic's crew. We barely escaped alive, as shortly after the Ghost transmitted its data, the ship exploded.
The pod shakes and Monel lets out a brief scream. One of the peacekeepers says something the camera doesn't pick up.
Oh, good,
the newscaster says, turning back to the camera.
I've been informed that a Quillant cruiser has recovered our pod. I say again, the data transmitted by the Ghost is incredibly damning to the Peacekeepers and likely to many others within the GC. I'm Monel Farash with GNO, live from an escape pod. Back to you in the studio.